Hello everybody. This afternoon we'll talk about the 4 different types of intercultural conflict styles. Scene. You see 2 people, perhaps from 2 different cultures. 1 screaming, yelling, arms flailing. Indirect communication. You have no idea what they're truly telling because they're speaking in metaphors, stories, maybe a sense of humor, maybe not. Second person. Showing no emotion at all. Listening, nodding ahead, and not knowing what to say. Have you ever seen this? If so, great, because today that's what we're going to talk about, what to do in these cases, and it will heighten your awareness. The objectives of this training is to demonstrate and show the 4 different types of intercultural conflict styles. This comes from the work of Geist. Geist did some research, and we have to talk about what a conflict is before we can define the different styles. A conflict is a substantive disagreement over values. Add on to the work of Geist the work of Mitch Hammer. Mitch Hammer in 2004 and before also worked for the National Institute of Health and for NASA. And he found, and through his research, he found that many people, perhaps of different cultures, were having different types of conflict styles. And not only is it a substantive disagreement over goals and values, but it's also causing stress and disharmony. So Mitch Hammer sought out to purport the 4 different types of intercultural conflict styles. Before we go any further, we have to talk about the 2 components, types of communication and also the expression of emotion. There are two types of communication. First direct, factual, linear, concrete, nothing left to the imagination. Indirect, vague, metaphors, analogies, perhaps a sense of humor, or perhaps even bringing in a third party. Do you know that so-and-so had a style issue with you? That's indirect. Communication styles. Now we talk about emotions. There's expressive and restrained. Expressive, arms flailing, voices raised, sadness, anger, fear. Not afraid to show any emotion. And then there are restrained emotions. Never let them see you sweat. Now we're going to go into the specifics. The first style of the intercultural conflict inventory is discussion. Discussion may be even perceived as cold because they don't show any emotions and factual, linear, concrete, nothing is left. You know where you stand when you're working with a person with a discussion style of conflict inventory. Discussion styles are generally people from Great Britain, America, Norway, Denmark, Sweden, and Germany. Before I go any further, I must say though that these are generalities and there are some exceptions. Next we'll go into the engagement style of intercultural conflict. People with an engagement style, opposite of discussion, aren't afraid to show their emotions at all. And they're direct, factual, concrete. Nothing is left to the imagination. Generally, France, Israel, Barcelona, or Spain, and Russia tend to use the engagement style of conflict. For example, I have some colleagues from Barcelona, and they shared that sometimes Americans can be dishonest with their emotions. See, again, going back to that discussion style of never letting them see you sweat. Whereas in a workplace in Barcelona, according to my colleagues, it's totally fine to walk in and say, I'm angry today, I'm in a bad mood, please stay away from me. Fair, honest, different style. Now we'll move on to the 2 types of conflict styles where there is indirect communication. We have accommodation. Accommodation, indirect, restrained emotions, often seen in people from Asian cultures, such as Malaysia, Japan, Thailand, China, and even parts of Latin America, such as Costa Rica and Peru. Now, an accommodation style, they may not answer your questions. Very calm voice because they're not showing any emotions. They may bring in a third party, and it can come across as maybe dishonest. What are they really trying to say? Are they really honest? I can't tell. They might answer in a way, for example, my colleague who lived in Japan for quite some time talked about, oh, it's complicated. Oh, this is complicated. Again, difficult to understand. Now we go to dynamic. Dynamic. Opposite from accommodation, yet in common with the fact that it's an indirect style of communication. Dynamic. Arms flailing, voices raised, highly expressive, often seen in cultures from the Middle East, Kuwait, Egypt, other cultures, Iraq, Iran. Tendency is dynamic style of communication. I want to go back and give one more example of the discussion style of communication, because that's the one I discovered that I have. And I noticed in an American workplace, and this was when I worked in the corporate sector, everybody in the cubicles had the same 8 values of the corporate culture. And part of corporate culture was to engage in straight talk. Now reflecting back on that, that was definitely a discussion style of communication. I reviewed the 4 different types of communication styles or intercultural conflict styles. We talked about discussion, direct, no emotions, engagement, direct, lots of emotions, accommodation, indirect, no emotions, dynamic, indirect, lots of emotions. This was just a very brief overview today from the work, again, of Mitch Hammer. Can be found, and there is a tool called the Intercultural Conflict Styles of Inventory, which may help you. And now that you know this brief overview of the 4 different styles of intercultural conflict, perhaps it can heighten your awareness. Maybe you'll start to make more observations. Gee, that seems to me it's a person with accommodation. How can I help? Maybe now the goal, harmony in relationships and making the world a better place to live.